Welcome to Wealth Matters podcast. I have with me Ali Boone, and I have connected with her for last 3-4 years on
hmm
Bigger Pockets. She's actually formerly an aerospace engineer, and she calls herself as a lifestyle entrepreneur. So we'll of course talk about that. And she's a real estate investor and an author. Ali, feel free to add.
No, I think you covered it.
Okay,
I'm like,
so
every title I've ever had, that's all of them.
that's perfect. So let's talk about this from aerospace engineering.
hmm
How did you become an entrepreneur, real estate investor, etc.? Can you talk about your journey?
Yeah, so the short of it was I grew up with the mindset that I think a lot of us do: go to school, get good grades, get a secure job,
Yes.
like, right? And so I did exactly that. And I got into aerospace engineering because I was actually a pilot first, and my plan was to be
Oh,
a
okay.
pilot. But when I started going to school and I was going for a professional pilot degree, I was like, well, that seems kind of limiting. and I also didn't really want the pilot lifestyle. Like, I didn't want to be gone 4 days a week, and and they don't get paid very much starting
Right,
out. And so I was like, well, what else could I do that would be a little more broad and make some more money? I
right.
was like, oh, engineering. It's got to be the
Yeah,
same thing.
yeah.
Not
So
even close.
you must be happy now that you are not a pilot, right? You can't even fly
Well, I am
right
still
now.
a pilot.
I mean,
I
it's
know,
not a
right?
commercial pilot.
No, no. Well, and commercial pilot, I've never, so I teach flying. It's like my fun
Oh,
side
really?
hustle.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's all I've ever done with it. I've never done an official pilot job outside of that. And there's big rumors of pilot shortages and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I just don't want that. Like, I love coming home at night. Like, I don't want to be in a
Right.
I used to, in my engineering job, I actually, for the last like 8-9 months of it, I was flying out every Monday to a particular place, and
Uh-huh.
I was by myself with nothing to do until Thursday or Friday, and I was like, ugh.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, it's a
it's
tough
not my
one.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so I switched over to engineering, went and got a master's degree in aerospace engineering because that sounded like exactly what I should be doing. And I'll never forget. So I got hired on at a pretty elite company, actually. And so, I decked myself out in my business casual clothes. I was like, my first big girl job. I was like, here we go. And I got to the building, and where my office was totally underground. It was like, it had to have been a half-mile walk underground. And so somebody was leading me along, and they were going to show me where I was going to work. And so I turned into the cubicle that I was about to live at. And in that moment, I was like, ugh. Like through grad school, I had been flight instructing. So my office was the sky, like it was adventurous and fun and
Right.
flying airplanes. And now I just turned the corner into the most drab looking
Yeah,
gray
that's
cubicle. I had never been in cubicles in my life. And it was in that moment, like something kind of just in my head was like, I got to get out of here. I hadn't even sat down yet. I was like, this isn't going to work. And I saw the cubicle and all the gray and the ick. And I looked down and I saw what I was wearing. Like, if you know me, fashion is not my, like, it's poor. Like, it's me dressing up is putting gym clothes on instead of pajamas.
Yeah,
So
that
I looked
that's
at
me
this like,
too.
oh my God. And so, which makes quarantine fantastic.
Yes.
So I looked down, I had tried to look really nice and business casual, and I was like, this is not, I got to get out of here. So that moment before I sat down, I was like, well, keep my mouth shut about this because, what a great start. Yay for my first day. But that prompted me as like, I have to get out of here. And I knew since I was little, like I've always been incredibly independent. And me working for someone was really probably only going to go so far. And so, but the problem was, like, I was smart. I had skills like flying airplanes and stuff, but I didn't have something specific of like,
Right.
am I going to start a business? Like, how am I going to get out of here? Like, everything I'm good at is not really like put me in this cubicle. I'm like, well, that's not helpful. And so I spent the next 5 years pretending to do my job. Occasionally I'd actually do it, but for the most part, I was just trying to figure out my way out. And I started with just really researching everything because I didn't know which path it was going to be. And through like reading books and all this kind of stuff, I realized like I was either going to have to start a business or get into real estate investing to some capacity. Those
Right.
seem to be the two things that get you out of a corporate job. And ironically, I ended up starting a real estate investing business, which was not planned at all. but I was exploring. I was doing like weekend seminars, reading everything I could. I was finding authors that I really resonated with, like Robert Kiyosaki, and I was like, ooh,
Uh-huh.
passive income. Tell me more. I
Yes.
want. Okay, I'm feeling that. Leveraging. I was loving that. So I would find the topics that I was really jamming towards, and ironically, I was like, okay, at some point I'm going to have to pick a strategy because I'm learning so much about so many things, or it's kind of like a little about learning a little about a lot of things. I needed to learn a lot about a little. And so I was like, well, I'll start a business. And I was like, what business should I start? And while I was pondering that, I got a real estate investment opportunity in my inbox just randomly. And I thought to myself, well, while I still have a good corporate job with the W-2 paycheck, I could at least be investing, do something smart with my money, because once
Right.
I leave here, who knows what's going to happen.
And that's an important point. I was
Mm.
sorry to interrupt, but
Oh, you're fine.
lots of time when we are stuck in that 9 to 5, people think, oh, you know what, I'm going to continue this. And at some point, I'm going to get out of it without any strategy or plan, right?
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you use that money to start investing, start building your, cash flow, your
Yeah.
retirement, whatever. And then if you think that's what you want to do, then you
Hmm.
can go after that in 3, 4, 5 years, right?
Yeah. And I think a really important thing that I ended up doing, you and I, before we started recording, kind of alluded to this, is I had had a million ideas. I was like, oh, well, this will work. Oh, well, this is the
Yes.
obvious answer out. Well, oh, I'm kind of feeling this one. Like, ooh, that would be exciting. Like,
Yes.
and like, I think it's so important to find the thing that's working first. Because
Uh-huh.
if I had just barreled out of my corporate job on a hunch, like, first of all, there's a very good chance that hunch isn't going to work. And second, you as an entrepreneur probably know this too. Even once I got my whole thing going, I was still broke as a skunk for the first year.
Yes.
And when you're broke, on one hand, it kind of lights a fire, and it's like, oh, I gotta hustle, I gotta do this. But on
Right.
the other hand, it's also fairly panic inducing.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So like when you're bombarded with panic, it really kind of hampers creativity. And so, like what I ended up doing was I started investing on the side, just thinking, oh, well, I'll do something smart with my money. And that particular investment opportunity that I pursued is how I ended up meeting everybody who later led me to starting my business. And so I actually started the business. Honestly, I started the business before it was a business. I didn't even know that that's what I was doing, but it kind of became a side hustle. And then I woke up one day and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Is this what I've been looking for? But when
Right.
I realized that, I started building it as much as I could before I left my corporate job. Again, to keep the paycheck going, I could do it on the
Right.
side and really try and get like as much footing, A, to make sure it was actually going to work, and B, to like, instead of trading my high paid corporate paycheck for zero, it would have been,
Yeah.
like, it's going to be less obviously, but I kind of ended up trading it for zero. But, yeah, I think that's a very important thing, is that it's, it's so easy to get like shiny object syndrome, especially
Yeah.
when you're trying to start a business, whatever. And like,
Oh,
I'm a big fan of organic business building. Like, I don't build a business before you have a business kind of thing. So I think it's very important, just and for sanity, because you're going to lose enough sanity when you have footing. You don't
that's
need help.
the
You don't need
that's
help.
the biggest problem with entrepreneurship, because you are always, and I'm still always looking for shiny object, right?
Yeah,
'Cause if you can focus on one thing, right, then that could change your destiny, right? But a lot of
yeah,
time we are always looking for what else, what are other
yeah.
ideas, right? So
Or in
it's
my
hard.
case, I'm trying to not look for those things, but I always see them. I'm like, ooh.
Right.
And
That's
we were talking a little bit about the COVID quarantine. It's been so fantastic for me because
yes.
it stopped me from distractions. I have gotten more done during quarantine because I can't chase the shiny object. I mean, even
Right.
going to the gym is a shiny object. It's like work, work, work. Oh, let's go to the gym. you
Right.
know?
Right.
So like, yeah, it's an interesting journey, and like, entrepreneurship is hard enough, like I said, with the solid footing. So, but I think too, entrepreneurs, we have a certain kind of mindset, and we are pretty smart people, and so it is easy to see other opportunities and think something's going to work. And but you kind of have to almost like reel yourself in and get focused, because if you don't stay focused, nothing ever, it's just not going to happen.
So, what are some of the qualities you would see in an entrepreneur, right? What do you need to have to be an entrepreneur?
can I say balls on here? I was like, well,
those are
should I say my
must.
first thought or? Entrepreneur, I think there's some obvious traits of an entrepreneur, like, business savvy, like the more kind of left-brained traits that we're all kind of familiar with, like how to make it happen. But, a lot of my experience has been, I was very, very left-brained growing up. Like I was a pilot, engineer, math is my favorite subject. Like I was all thought and very little feeling. And entrepreneurship pretty much beat me down in that department because there is such a demand for not to sound too far like woo-woo about it, but like there's a demand for surrender. Like I'll never forget my first year. So here I am, like engineer, pilot, like I am trained to make results happen. Like that was my whole life, is like if I want something to happen or if I need it to happen, I have to make that happen. That was my training. Well, guess what you can't necessarily do in entrepreneurship? It's like, my business was selling real estate. I can't make somebody buy a property.
Right.
I just can't.
Yeah.
And so the first few months in that first year, here I am, I'm like, okay, this is happening. I don't have to be anywhere at 9:00 on Monday morning and like, oh, this is so great. But on the other hand, I couldn't make someone buy a property and give me money for rent. I was like, uh-oh. And it was this very rude awakening of like, I literally have to kick back. I'll never forget, the thought in my head was, okay, all I can do is the best that I can do every single day. After that, I don't have control over this. I mean, control really is the operative word, right? Like I had control over everything in my life before entrepreneurship, and I couldn't control this. I could control what I did and my efforts, but I couldn't control whether or not this worked.
The results, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think entrepreneurs, like I say a lot of times, like, I don't think it, because people say like, 95% of small businesses fail, or like whatever all those statistics are. And entrepreneurship is really hard. I don't necessarily think that it's the business part of it can be hard and it is a certain skill set, but I think the part that's not so obvious is the emotions involved, because, I had never been more stressed out in my first year, but I had also never been happier. And, as a control freak pilot engineer person, having to learn to literally surrender to the fate, like, and it didn't stop there. Like once everything started going and, income started rolling in, and finally I didn't have to worry about and you're also worried about like, are you going to pay rent every month?
Yeah.
Are you going to feed, like, that's terrifying. And so, even after everything settled out, it's a roller coaster. So it's not over. And so I think the most important trait in my mind about entrepreneurs is the willingness to go along that ride, way more even than the business, because you can be business savvy all day long, but if you can't hang on for that roller coaster, it's kind of like the rite of passage, right? Like you kind of have to do it.
No, this is great, because I never thought about surrendering yourself. I always thought, again, from my own perspective, I was 9 to 5 computer engineer, right? Doing all that stuff, what we have been through. But for me, I was an action taker. I didn't care about results, right? I was always taking on risks. And I thought entrepreneurs, and you mentioned that kind of, that you got to have those.
Yeah.
Because you exactly.
You have to have those.
So no, this is awesome.
Well, and I think to your point real quick too, is that I'm also an action taker. Like I still sometimes have to stop myself from trying to take an action. Like, okay, just hang on. And so like, it was that weird balance, right?
Yes.
It's like, I was trying to take so many actions, but normally in the past, so like if I'm in an airplane, right? And I need the airplane to do something in particular, I take actions in order to make that happen. Except with entrepreneurship, what I was finding is that I would take the actions, but that didn't necessarily make the result happen.
Right.
That's where the hitch in this whole thing came in. And I was like, again, pilot engineer, like, ooh, what, like my mindset, like if I'm in an airplane and it's a critical situation, I have to be able to make that plane do something. And if I can't, it can literally
it's do or die.
Yes. So I have like survival, mode in my brain. And so like, if I can't make something happen with my actions in entrepreneurship, my brain is like death.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait, calm down. Like,
Yeah.
and then I become a schizophrenic, and I'm like having these conversations with like, oh man. Yeah. So, but I just wanted to clarify on that
No, but
point, is
that's
that was actually kind of the hard part, is my actions didn't necessarily dictate the results
yeah.
anymore, where they had my whole life.
That's a great point, and I just thought about it as well, that 3 years ago, or not 3 years, 5 years ago now, since I started investing in real estate, I would have just jumped on any deal I would have seen, right?
Yeah.
And I had made a lot of mistakes. Just recently in January, I was about to acquire an Airbnb, and I backed out, and I'm glad that I did back out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. It's entrepreneurship, but you learn as you go, right? So you start taking action, then you realize that not every action is going to produce same kind of results. So now you got to step back and figure out, do you want to take this action, right?
Well, and that's
So,
really
yeah.
one of the traits too that's so important, is that you might as well just assume you're going to make mistakes, and
Oh,
you have to be
yes.
willing to pick yourself back up and keep going, because a lot of people make one mistake and they're like,
They give
oh,
up.
I'm worthless, and then they quit.
Yes.
And it's like, dude, that's like, you can't have that mindset. So like, a trait really is perseverance. Like, you
Yes.
have to keep pushing. And there's been so many times I'm like, why do I have to have an entrepreneur brain?
Right.
Like, it'd be
Right.
so much easier to just, I have friends that, like, I have this one friend that says, she's like, you know what? I'm 100% content and happy having a 9-to-5 job working for someone else. Like, she is so
Yes.
happy doing that. And I sometimes wish I could be that. Like, because my version is exhausting, but
Yeah.
it's perseverance. Like, you have to be able to pick yourself up, brush it off, and learn from whatever happens,
Uh-huh.
and then keep going. Don't fall into the definition of insanity of doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's picking yourself back up for sure.
Yeah.
And
Couldn't.
laughing about it later. Like, I mean, I
Right.
don't know, you put a bunch of entrepreneurs in the room, throw a couple beers around, like, we're going to have
That's
some
it.
really fun stories. But like, oh, you'll never guess what happened this time.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more.
Hmm.
So I just saw your bio, and another thing you had mentioned was your ultimate goal is to one day challenge Tim Ferriss to a lifestyle design duel. What do you mean by lifestyle design?
So lifestyle design for me is, I like to put lifestyle design into perspective. If you think about when you retire, so you hit 65, you get to walk out of your job, you don't have to be anywhere. What do you want your life to be? Like, what would you do with your life then? And it's the idea of bringing that concept into now. Like, because so many of our lives are dictated by our jobs, right? Where
Uh-huh.
we live, because we have to live near our job. It's not even that you're working 8 or 9 hours a day. You have to get up, you have to get ready for the
Yes.
job, you have to drive to the
Commute.
job, then go do the job, then drive home from the job, decompress from the job. So it's not 8 or 9 hours of your
No.
day. It's like 10 or 12.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's on a normal schedule.
Yeah, you and I live in LA and San Francisco, and that people have at least 2 to 3 hours commute,
Oh,
right? So
and
you're talking about
I did
12
that.
hours a day,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and I did that when I was finishing my engineering job, because I couldn't, I was up in I couldn't live there anymore. So I ended up doing, it was like an hour to an hour and a half commute
Oh,
each
yes.
way. It was like 62 miles. Fortunately, I was
Wow.
against traffic. But yeah, it's like, even if you don't have a long commute, it's the getting ready time, decompression time,
Yes.
whatever. So, people, and, with the baby boomers and all that, it makes total sense why people have this mentality of, you just go to work, you do what you're supposed to do, end of story. But nowadays, we have so many more resources where you don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to sell your soul to survive. You can, I mean, I was just watching Shark Tank last night. Hello, I'm obsessed with Shark Tank. And,
Oh, I love
honestly,
Shark Tank.
anybody can do anything today. Like,
Yes.
back in the baby boomers days, it was much more limited, all that kind of stuff, but it's not now. And so, like, if I think about, like, if I were to retire right now, like, what would my life look like? And quite frankly, my life right now looks exactly like it would if I was retired. And when I left my corporate job, even though I was about to go on this giganto entrepreneur journey, I said that I retired at 30, because even though I still had to work to make income, I could structure it any way I want. Like I can sleep in as late as I want, which I dearly love doing. I can work when I want. I quite often get way more done at midnight than I do during the day. I can travel when I want because everything I do is online based. So I can just
Right.
pick up my laptop, go. Even in my first year of entrepreneurship, I traveled the world a little bit. Like I was broke, but, so like we have in our minds that retirement means you don't have to work for your money anymore, which to some degree, whatever, but you can still work for your money and structure your life exactly. Like, what would that look like? Like, for instance, I almost refuse to go skiing or snowboarding on a weekend because the lift lines are terrible. Well, guess what?
Oh, yeah.
I go on Tuesday because I
That's
can,
awesome.
you know? And so like, and I live pretty close to the beach. I can just, I can jet off to the beach and hang out for a while. I can wake up and I'm thinking, I'm not really feeling working yet. Like I might watch an episode of my soap opera. Like that's lifestyle design. I get to choose what I do. And so, thinking of Tim Ferriss, he really is kind of the one that coined this
Oh,
whole
yes.
concept of like,
4-hour
wait,
work week.
yeah, oh, it set the stage for everybody. And it's
Yes.
like, and I will admit, I've kind of calmed down on my like avid desire to challenge him to a lifestyle design duel, because back in like a few years ago, I wanted to travel as much as I was doing adventures like crazy, and I was like, oh, Tim ain't got nothing on me. But now I've kind of grown up a little. I'm like, I've come down a little bit. But yeah, I love that he brought that concept forward, because I'll tell you, like, it's game changing. Like, it sounds so small to be able to travel when I want to or to sleep in. The joy that those things bring
Yes.
me is like unexplainable. Like I couldn't even put it in words. So I'm a huge it's really just designing your life how you want it to be and make things work in your favor. And just, I mean, we're here once, so
Yeah. Why
might as
not
well have fun.
enjoy? Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. No, that is awesome. Let's take a quick break, and after the break, we can talk about the impact of coronavirus.
Ooh.
Welcome back to Wealth Matters Podcast. I'm chatting with Ali Boone, and she's an entrepreneur and lifestyle design a specialist. I enjoyed right before the break talking to her about lifestyle design. I asked these questions to almost all my guests for last month or so, because we have seen a lot of impact because of this pandemic. So
Mhm.
what do you see would be the impact of COVID-19 on real estate? Or are you already seeing some impact?
I admit when COVID started, I was as clueless as everyone else. And not to
Right.
say that I'm not still, because I think, we can think about anything we want to. We can come up with any conclusions we want to. I don't think any of us can say we know exactly what's going
No.
to happen. Um, but, getting more educated on it over now that it's been going on for a couple months, which seems crazy. Feels like it just started.
Yes.
Um, it's, I've seen, because I work with buyers of investment properties, I've seen a slowdown there for sure, just because nobody knows what's happening. Like,
Right.
okay, wait,
Yes.
like, do I need to keep cash under my mattress, or like,
Yeah, we
and
don't know.
our housing price is going to drop because I don't want to buy it now if it's going to be on sale in a couple months, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think just generally there's been a pause on at least the investors buying. I have some friends that are agents with primary home buyers. A lot of people are still buying like crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but getting a little further into it, I think there's some interesting dynamics going on, right? So one of them is called, and I can never get this word rolling off my tongue, but it's de-densification. Have you heard this one?
I read it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm like, hang
Like
on,
people
I
are
gotta.
moving to urban and suburban markets, right? Is
Yeah,
that
like I have to
yes?
practice rolling it off my tongue,
Yeah,
but it's a
yeah.
thing where, so like people now, because of this like contagious virus and all that, like people aren't necessarily wanting to live in gigantic apartment
Exactly.
buildings.
Or populous
Yeah. And
areas,
they're
right?
like, dear God, get me away from other humans. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people, and it's already started.
Uh-huh.
So, what's interesting too is that, in talking about this, is thinking about this concept of market segmentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's about not looking at real estate as a whole, but down into different components. So looking just at commercial and residential, for example, these gigantic commercial apartment buildings are about to be in trouble because everyone's trying to get that out of there. Like,
Right.
oh, I don't want to share freaking laundry with like who knows who, what has
Oh,
what.
I see.
And so people are wanting to get more spread out, which means they are starting to move a little bit more towards suburban areas, depending on where you are. Single family houses, and there's gonna be some markets like New York and all that, you can't necessarily get away from big apartment buildings, but that's the concept of de-densification. So the word dense is people want to get spread out. Like, we don't want to have to wear masks for the rest of our life, but in thinking of the market segmentation, so looking at it from that perspective, like think of the commercial space. So people are trying to get out of big apartment buildings. That's one issue. Now, so many companies have gone virtual and are figuring out that they can stay virtual.
Yes.
What's going to happen to a lot of retail shops or office buildings or, and I think that kind of started before this. Like, I always wondered every time, because I've looked into every investment strategy and I'm always curious. And I was like, something about the retail stuff though, like so many things are online, like Amazon's wiping out the mom and pop shops, like, so that was kind of already starting, but now I think this is like a hike, like people aren't going to want to be in office spaces like they used to. So I think the commercial sector is looking at some problems, huge, but I think the residential sector, and then thinking of segmentation within residential, is like the different property types, but different markets, like different cities. Like New York is obviously going to be in a very different space than, Omaha or something like that.
So secondary, tertiary markets, right?
Yeah.
They are all different. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's really having this mindset of looking at the different pieces instead of the economy as a whole. And what I've learned a lot about is I didn't know really a lot of the history of recessions. Do you know, like the 2008 crash was the only one where housing values actually dropped, because the whole thing was based on the crazy loan situation, whatever. But the previous recessions to that, 4 of them, I think, housing values went up.
Oh, really?
So, yeah,
oh, wow.
in every single one of them.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of thing that people don't realize with this is like, what are we looking at here? So if you look at it from kind of the things I said is like, I mean, I'm a little biased towards single family properties because that's most of what I work with. But if you look at it, like people are wanting to move to those types of properties to get out of the crowds, and housing values, first of all, we're low on supply. If you think of this in a supply and demand perspective, it's like nobody wants anyone to even come look in their house. So they're like off the market. So supply is getting lower, which means demand's going to get higher. And, so because I'm in more of the single family, sometimes like duplex, but like small residential, the demand is there, the supply is low. So it's just, I admit that what it's looking like so far is very different than what I assumed 2 months ago, because I think I was in the same mindset as everyone's like, oh my God, everyone's losing their job. No one's going to have money. Everything's going to crash, biggest recession ever. And housing prices are going to plummet.
I'm changing. I'm changing my thinking every week, as we go, because no one has seen this. This hasn't happened for 100 years. And having a lockdown worldwide, that's never heard of, or even you haven't even read about it. Right.
I actually, so I heard, I was talking to, I've got kind of different teams and mentors and, all my folks. One of the guys was saying, he goes, well, the other thing you have to think about is that there's going to be a need for housing expansion. And I was like, what does that mean? He said, if you think about it, people right now are either having babies or getting divorced.
Yes, that's true. Actually, I heard of both of this.
If your household is going to expand with children, you're probably going to, need more housing. If you're going to divorce, now you need 2 houses for the same 2 people, or even roommates who now can't stand each other.
Right.
And I was like, I would like to think we're just joking, but I think he might be kind of right.
No, actually, I was, again, I don't want to go off tangent, but I was reading about it, and China is seeing highest divorce rate right after the lockdown.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was like, I have a feeling a lot of people's shadows are coming out on this one.
Yes.
But yeah, so like, a lot of people bring up like unemployment and all that kind of stuff. People can't, they're not going to have money to support the housing or whatever. But like with unemployment up, a lot of people can't afford mortgages. So now they have to become renters, which again supports the strategy I'm involved with. So again, it's so important to look at each segment of the whole situation as far as real estate and otherwise, because as a whole, it's not like commercial may plummet, residential may go up, different things everywhere. So in the strategies, you have to keep that in mind, but really look where the demand is happening from this, because it's interesting.
That's awesome. So, favorite real estate or finance or any other related book?
I know it's super cliche, and I can't imagine that anyone listening has not already read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I
Like
like,
almost everyone has recommended it,
let's
including me.
let's just make sure everybody has read this.
Yes.
But I mean, as people have probably said, like, it was my starting point, and I actually, when I was researching, like, how am I going to get out of this corporate job, I found Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I ended up reading a whole slew of the Rich Dad series books,
Yes,
and I
they're
can
all
honestly
amazing.
tell you that not only my investing, but my entrepreneurship, if it weren't for some very key things I read in a lot of those books, I don't think I would be where I was today. Like, it's not even just Rich Dad Poor Dad. That was just the starting point. But that
Uh-huh.
whole series was absolutely game changing. And the other one that's been really, really helpful for me is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Oh,
It's
yes.
technically a business book, but honestly, the concepts that he teaches could be applied to business, to real estate, to your life. Like, I think about it in my life terms occasionally. I've read through it a couple times. For a long time, I was calling it my business Bible. Like, it's so small and so, but like critical. Like, I think the concepts in there are just critical. And I mean, if we were doing this like a month from now, I'd say obviously my own book. It's in the process of being launched right now.
Oh, that's
so,
awesome. What
so
is it?
depending on when you hear this, it's called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing: Life Lessons for Hacking Your Mind Before You Hack Your Wallet. So the idea of it is like a prerequisite to the how-to guides, because I say, like, if your mindset's not right, there's not a how-to guide in the world that's going to help you. And if you're diving into real estate, most of what you're going to find are the how-to guides. And so, like, what are the big discussion points before diving into the how-tos? Because, like we talked about with entrepreneurship, something can look phenomenal on paper, like, oh, here's my how-to guide, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be a house flipper. Well, like, how can you save yourself from diving into that world and it not working? It can work for
Yeah.
lots of people, but it may not for you. So that's what my book is kind of and it's kind of fun. It's a little bit lighter energy, I think, than a lot of real estate books, but it's definitely mindset geared. So again, depending on when you hear this recording.
So I will put that in the show notes, and most
Cool.
probably this would air in a month. So
Mm-hmm.
it may work out. So,
Perfect.
and I would love to read that book as well.
Yeah. You want to be an early reader? I'll give you an
Yes.
early copy. Right
Yeah, for
on.
sure. I love
I'm writing
reading.
you. I'm like, and you have been added. Yeah, but I'm super, super excited about it, because
That's
I
awesome.
know my career, both entrepreneurship and real estate, was 100% based on the books I read. I've never been a big technology, internet kind of person. So, like, I wasn't in forums at the time. Now I am, but like, my whole everything came from books. And so I'm so excited to be able to hopefully give a book back and help people in, from the things I've learned and all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. How do you give back?
So, total sidebar of how I give back. My absolute, when I'm not doing real estate, or actually I'll quit doing real estate and business when I do this. So I actually volunteer in prisons all the time.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of up by you, out in like Madera, Chowchilla type of
Uh-huh.
area. So obviously I'm not going to the prisons right now because of COVID, but
Uh-huh.
for about a year, I was driving up there literally every Sunday and driving home. It was like an 8-hour round trip drive.
Yes.
And then we do like weekend workshops and stuff. And I will tell you, like, it's really my first, I mean, I've done some volunteering stuff in the past, but not like to this level. And it is, I mean, and we're in like the state prisons, so we're not dealing with, petty criminals. We're talking
Oh,
like the
yes.
big guns. And my favorite, we go in both men's and women's, but I work mostly with the men. And, it's game changing to sit across from somebody who has gone through particularly heinous events,
Yes.
and talk to them. And like, so many times I'll be sitting across from some big burly dude, and like, all of a sudden I can just see this like 2-year-old in him who just wanted his mommy to love him, and you're like, oh,
Oh.
wow. And it really, it's changed how I see the world. It's changed how I see people. It's changed my level of compassion. But yeah, oh my God, like that's a whole different podcast once I start talking about prison. But I
That's
love
great.
going to prison. In case someone like just tuned in and that's the only thing
Right.
they hear me say.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But that's my big. I'm always looking for other opportunities. I will say that entrepreneurship has put more of that service oriented mindset in
Yes.
my head. I didn't have that before. And so, just where I can be of help, I really want to. And, part of that retired kind of thing is like, I want to be able to have enough free time to be able to give back. And the more I do it, it becomes more and more impactful, not even just for the people I'm helping, but for me, for sure. So, yeah.
No, and I would 100% agree to that. That, from moving to employee to entrepreneurship, somehow that
Mhm.
service mindset, the giving mindset kicks in. I
Yeah.
don't know how and why, but I also read the book called The Go Giver. And
Oh, I haven't read that one.
that was an amazing book. That's one of my
Hmm.
favorite. And it
The
changed my
Go
mindset.
Giver.
Yes.
Okay. Go
It's
Giver.
by John Mann and Bob Burg.
Okay.
Yeah, I have given that book as a gift to so
Oh,
many of my
that's
friends
awesome.
as well, because that's one of, and you're right, it just changes the mindset, right? And if
Hmm.
you think about entrepreneur in a way that you are creating jobs, you are already
Yeah.
creating some kind of service, right?
Yeah.
Before, when you are working as an employee, you are not creating job, you are working for someone. You didn't even think about that you may have to do
Hmm.
something like. So
Yeah. It's almost
I
kind of like a
agree.
weird, like, it's like I'm working for someone else, but I'm able to be more selfish. Like
Yeah.
versus like entrepreneurship, I'm helping other people. But like I think for me too, part of when I was talking about me getting my ass humbled out of no, like I needed help. And so like when I was a pilot and engineer and all that kind of stuff, like I did my own math problems, right?
Yeah.
But entrepreneurship was so humbling. I mean, some people probably get away and not really have help, but I needed help. And
Yeah.
so like receiving help, I think is part of what changed my mindset of like, oh, well, if I know how much I benefit from help, and there's just I'll tell you at the prisons, and I'll refrain from going on a whole like hours long tangent about the prison, but what I didn't know before I started going to the prison is the level of trauma that is truly existent in this world. Like
Mm.
like some of my absolute favorite guys have committed incredibly heinous crimes, and I have yet to have met one of them that, having once I learned their whole story, it didn't make their crime make total sense to me. I'm like, oh, I get how he got there, kind of thing. Like it doesn't condone it, but and so I think that's been part of the eye-opening thing is like the level of trauma that is truly present in this world, most of us will never understand or relate to or even know about. And so like, I think between learning that kind of stuff and then me seeing myself out of control, and not me out of control, but not in control, it changes the perspective of reality kind of thing. So in such an amazing way. Yeah. So
Oh, this was awesome. How can my listeners reach out to you?
So I actually made a link just for your listeners. If they go, so my company is Hipster Investments. If you go to hipsterinvestments.com/wealth matters, I wrote an ebook. So we didn't actually talk about my strategy, but I work with turnkey rental properties, and I wrote a whole ebook of like, it's called Turnkey Rental Properties 101. It sells for Amazon for $14.99, and I put it on this link so your folks can get it for free.
Okay,
So if you go to
awesome.
that link, get the free ebook. Again, we didn't talk about turnkeys, but whatever, they're cool.
Yeah, no.
And
And
but
we
it's
have spoken about turnkeys before
mhm,
on the podcast, and I do have some turnkey providers I
yeah.
work with as well as recommend.
Oh, perfect.
So
Well,
my
and two,
listeners
like
do know.
yeah, even if you get the ebook, even if you don't care about turnkeys, like that's how you're also gonna get notices when the book launches too. Like the book is done and ready. We're just trying to figure out like how we're getting it out there. Technology is not my strong suit, like or marketing for that matter.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so like go get the ebook for free. There's links on there how you can connect with me. You'll get notices about the book and all that. And ultimately, I love saying hi to people. So even if you just reach out, say hi, like I'm all for it. I love meeting everybody.
Thank you so much. I had fun, Ellie, chatting
Yeah,
with
thanks
you.
for having me.
Have a nice weekend.
You too.